at this moment, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Ms. Maria Blanco.
Well, we have a really great panel, and I'm so glad to see that Hope has a panel on community. It's sometimes we don't think of community when we're thinking about workshops that advance, Latinas. We're often thinking about professional advancement, but as probably everybody at this panel will tell you, community work at all levels is another important form of career and contributing to the community. I'll introduce our panelists in order. I think most of them don't require an introduction, but sometimes it's good to hear again what people's accomplishments are, to remind us why we have them on panels and what they really are, what they really mean for our community. So Supervisor Gloria Molina, who's supervisor for District 1, became the first Latina ever elected to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, and that se dice fácil, but it really wasn't. I had to go through litigation and all the way to the Supreme Court, so se dice fácil. Though the Chicano Power Movement, through the Chicano Power Movement, the women's movement and the national movement against the Vietnam War awakened Supervisor Molina's interest in civic affairs. She formally entered first as Chief Deputy for California State Assemblyman Art Torres, who many of you know as well, and later for State Assembly Speaker Willie Brown. And she divides her time, and I don't know how she does this, between family, her county supervisor position, and her love for quilting, for which she has received recognition for original pieces she created. I will turn it over to Supervisor Molina and then introduce the speakers as their turn is up.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad that so many of you have joined us for this panel discussion. And I guess the panel discussion is about empowerment. Certainly, we're all looking to empower ourselves and certainly empower the community. But it's also about lessons learned from Bell. I guess we've all heard the sad story of what's gone on in Bell, and I think there are lessons to be learned, but I don't know that those lessons have been learned. We will await the election, which is next Tuesday, and see what kind of lessons have been learned in Bell, and then of course we'll wait for another year or so to see what the newly elected leadership will do. But it's very telling about what's going on in many areas of politics, particularly in many, well, I guess across the board. And I said it yesterday, I spoke to another group, and I am very, very discouraged by what is going on with special interest. Special interests are controlling all that is going on in politics one way or another. And unfortunately, it is special interest who are electing many of our elected officials. And it is tough as an elected official to stand up to those special interests when you know, in fact, they're going to pour a ton of money into your campaign against you so that you're not going to have an opportunity to be a part of the significant issues that you were elected to carry out. Special interests, when they put their money into a campaign, even though they tell you they expect nothing, is baloney. Total baloney. They totally expect you to be and do everything that they want, and if not, they come out against you. I know because I have had to have those kinds of situations, and luckily I've been able to build a kind of a wall of support. I think that today, if I were running for an assembly seat, or if I was even running for a city council seat, in any small city or for the city of LA, I could not get elected. Could not get elected. And the reason I could not get elected is because I don't have the capability of saying yes sir, yes ma'am to every special interest and then carrying out many of their bad policy issues. And so the biggest problem that's going on, and it's not just here locally, it's across the board, when you look at Congress, I mean, after all of the candidates on both sides of the aisles promised us about health care reform, and then all of a sudden they drew lines in the sand and have, you know, it was so tough for President Obama to pass the kind of health care reform that was passed. I felt he should have been much more assertive and aggressive, but when you think of what he had to overcome in order to get what he did, it is amazing that he was able to pass health care reform. Unfortunately, as you know, the special interests are very well heeled. They spend millions upon millions of dollars to overcome it. But luckily, there were people who stood firm in the Congress and were able to pass it, a modified level of it. Some of us wanted something much stronger and more effective. And unfortunately now the special interests have spent a whole year and a half, and we're going to see them overturn a good deal of it because they made sure that many of those people that had supported it did not get reelected. And that's the problem that's going on. And we don't see it, we don't notice it as much, but it's happening every single moment. So when we look at what's going on in Bell, and I know that for many of us who have been part of empowering the Chicano community, I mean, when I was first, running for office, there had never been a Chicana Latina ever elected to the California State Legislature. There had never been, at that time, luckily by that time we had gotten a Latina in the U.S. Congress from Texas and from Florida. But it is something that if in fact you believe in representative government, then in fact you have to make sure that it truly represents the electorate. And very frankly, that's been a battle, not just now with special interest, but more so now that is going on with just making sure that we have an opportunity to be a part of it. And every single opportunity, even with the first one, it's been a tough battle for me. And even a couple of years ago when I stood very firm, I didn't buy hook, line, and sinker everything that the unions wanted. I come out of a union family, very supportive of collective bargaining, but I just don't believe in everything and anything that they do. And so when I stood up for them on some of the retirement things, when they thought that policemen should retire at 50 years of age with, 3% of their salary for what they had worked, which is almost 90% of their salary. I think at 50, you're very able-bodied and should be able to continue to work. And very frankly, we know that you're going to be working for another 20 to 25 years, or at least that you're going to be retired or collecting retirement for at least 20 to 25 years. It's going to be a very expensive thing for us to pay. I didn't find it palatable, so I stood up against it. And then the following election year, they worked very hard in trying to find a candidate to run against me. And I had to build up my forces as well, and luckily I was able to overcome it, but it was going to be very tough sledding. Had they found a candidate, and they would have poured all that special interest and the independent money that's going on. So that's the bottom line as to what's going on and the backdrop for what's going on in Bell. Bell has been not only special interest, but totally corrupt special interest. When you see that there have been key people who are benefiting salaries, contracts, I call them predators in the Southeast community because we are surrounded by predators. And many of them, of course, are Chicano predators as well. They dress themselves as accountants and lawyers and consultants. And what they want is basically to control the contracting mechanism on the budget of those cities, to secure contracts, to pull out dollars.